Hi, it's Grandma here, and I'm reading a new book, The Light At Tern Rock. Now, before we read a book, or before we choose one in the library, we usually look at the cover and we maybe ask a few questions to see, just to get our brains activated as to what it's going to be reading about. And in this case, we read the title, The Light at Tern Rock, and we can assume by the picture that the light they're talking about is a lighthouse. But I don't know what a Tern Rock is. Down here we see that it's a Newbery Honor book, but what does that mean? Well, let's go to the back cover and let's read what's on the back cover. First of all, it says a Newbery Honor book is awarded annually by the American Library Association for the most distinguished contribution in American literature for children. And then we read a little bit more about it. It says, will Ronnie have to spend Christmas stranded in a lighthouse? So we know that it happens around Christmas. Ronnie and his aunt are attending the Tern Rock Lighthouse for 2 December weeks while its keeper takes a much-needed vacation. Ronnie learns to love the slap of the waves against the rocks, sleeping in a bunk, climbing the winding staircase, and lighting the great lamp each night. And he looks forward to telling his family about it at Christmas. But the days go by, and the lighthouse keeper doesn't return to take them home. But we still don't know exactly where this takes place, and we don't know his aunt's name, and we kind of wonder, what in the world does he do if he's in a lighthouse the whole time? When I open this book, I see that Julia L. Sauer, who is the author, was a librarian. I looked it up, and she was a librarian in Rochester, New York. And this book takes place in Canada, and I looked that up, and it takes place in Nova Scotia. So even though she's from the United States, she has a vacation home in Nova Scotia, and this book takes place in Nova Scotia. Another thing we do when we preview a book is we go through and we look at the pictures in the book. And there are a lot of great pictures in this book. So I'll be showing you them as we go along. But we still don't know what a Tern Rock is. Here's a picture of Ronnie going up the winding staircase. The other thing that I like to do when I'm previewing a book is I like to look at the table of contents because it often tells even more. And this one only has 4 chapters. Ashore, Aboard the Rock, Doldrums, and Christmas Eve. So how many of you have seen a lighthouse or been in a lighthouse? Well, usually the lighthouses are on a coast of some kind, although when we lived in St. Louis, there are lighthouses along the Mississippi River as well. But there's land and there's roads to get to them and that. But this says ashore and then aboard the rock. So it's talking as if the rock is like a ship. And doldrums, what does doldrums mean? And then Christmas Eve. It does take place around Christmas. So let's begin reading. Ashore. And we have a picture here of 2 older people, a man and a woman, talking and in a rocking chair. Why, Mr. Morse, what boy wouldn't relish a holiday in a lighthouse, especially a light like Tern Rock, way out to sea and all? The keeper of Tern Rock Lighthouse tossed his cap on the table and drummed impatiently on the arms of his chair. Martha Morse answered him quietly. I don't doubt that Ronnie would enjoy it, Mr. Flagg, but I don't like the idea of taking him out of school for 2 weeks. He's doing well this fall, and children shouldn't be uprooted just to suit the convenience of their elders. School? Byron Flagg shrugged, showed how little he thought of school, and Mrs. Morse smiled. You see, she said, it isn't as if Ronnie were my own child. I think I feel even more responsible for him because he's a nephew. Maybe, she continued, you could find someone else. The keeper's face screwed up with disappointment. It's like I told you, Mrs. Morse, he tried hard to sound persuasive. The superintendent said if I could find me a substitute that knows the light, I could take an extra shore leave and pay 'em myself. I've gone over everybody in my mind that was ever stationed out there. You're the only one I can reach. You know that light and what it's like out there. You can spell me for a fortnight, same as if you was a man. And with the boy to keep you company, the time will pass mighty fast. Provisions and supplies are all aboard. Everything's battened down, ready for winter. It'll be an easy fortnight for you. And again, he's making it sound like it's a boat. He paused and looked across at her with his shrewd old eyes. When he spoke again, his voice was very casual. How long was it you lived on the rock? He asked. 14 years, Mrs. Morse told him. My husband was keeper there for 14 years. She rose from her chair, walked over to the window. She stood looking out at the cold, gray-green November afternoon, at the little path that wound between the spruces and the road. Hers was the last house on the edge of the village, and she had chosen it purposely. She had lived 14 years without neighbors, and she was wise enough to know that the threads of village life must be taken up again gradually. Only so could she bear to part with the beauty and isolation of Tern Rock. The fresh birch logs crackled in the shining range, and the smooth, neat kitchen grew darker. The keeper gave her plenty of time. He pursed his lips into a tight line to hide the little grin that was edging its way in. Then he spoke very softly, but as if there had been no interruption. 14 years now. I've only been out there 5, but I've learned one thing already. You can't live on Tern Rock without it doing something to you. And down inside right this minute, his voice fell to a whisper, right this minute, you're longing to go back. You're wishing you could watch the spray flung back on the ledge. You're wishing you could stand out there against the seawall and listen, and listen, and listen. Mrs. Morse turned toward him quickly, and he laughed out loud at the change in her face. I'm right, ain't I? I can tell you want to go. Oh, come now and give an old man a good long leave. Let the boy's teacher set him some sums and you hear his spelling and his reading. He'll be all the wiser for a stay on the old rock. Mrs. Morse smiled suddenly, and the keeper knew he had won. You're right, Mr. Flagg, she said. But what business has a man to know so well how a woman feels about places where she's been happy? You've got wisdom, Mr. Flagg. Maybe it's the wisdom of the serpent, because you've certainly tempted me against my better judgment. I do believe I am homesick for the rock, even if it is the loneliest place in the world. I'd like to accommodate you, but I've got to admit that if I go, it's for selfish reasons. She hesitated and then spoke more sharply. But how do you know you'll be able to get us off when your leave's up? You know, well as I do, that weeks and weeks can go by and not a chance of landing on the rock. You say you'll come for us by December 15th, but how can you be so sure? Oh, there won't be nothing worse than a 3-day blow, not in December. That wouldn't hold you up long. The woodshed door banged suddenly, and there was a sound of running feet. Aunt Marthy, guess what? The kitchen door flew open and Ronnie burst in. We began to practice Christmas carols today. Oh! He stopped when he saw that his aunt had a guest. Martha Morse smiled at him. Shut the door tight, Ronnie. There's a good wind. We've got company. Mr. Flagg, this is my nephew, Ronnie, son of my husband's brother. Mr. Flagg is a keeper of Tern Rock lighthouse. Ronnie, where your Uncle Irvin and I used to live. Well, howdy, Ronnie. How'd you like to spend a fortnight on the rock yourself? Wouldn't that be something now to tell the fellas about? We have a picture here of them. The face of the sturdy small boy lit up, and he gave a long whistle. I'd sure like to see Tern Rock Light. But he stopped and looked at his aunt. But what, Ronnie? She asked. Go on. Would we be home for Christmas? Ronnie asked bluntly. For Christmas? Holy mackerel, yes, and long before, the keeper answered for her. I'm only asking your aunt to go out until the 15th. I'll be back by then. Yes, sir, not a day later than the 15th. I just want to make a little visit to a niece and her family over beyond St. John, and I can't do it on my 5-day leave. You'd like to go, wouldn't you, boy? Oh, I'd rather go some other time, not so close to Christmas, Ronnie said honestly, but I would like to go. And are we going, Aunt Marthy? I reckon so, Ronnie, and I know you'll enjoy it. Great, that's settled then, ma'am. The keeper had gained his point, and he wanted to be on his way before she could change her mind. I'll see that the superintendent knows. You and the boy will go out on Thursday and take over from my relief, Wilbert Denton. He's out there now. And I'll see that you get word when to be down to the shore. Yes, and I'll arrange for somebody to give you a hand with your luggage. You'll want all your warm duds, and thank you, Mrs. Morris, thank you. Mr. Flagg, just a minute. Martha Morris's quiet gray eyes held the keeper's reluctant ones, and she spoke firmly. You give me your word. You'll come for us by the 15th. Sure, Mrs. Morris, on the 15th without fail. Course, he added casually, if there's a blow, it'll be a day or two later. But I'll be out for you. And boy, he turned to Ronnie, you will think Tern Rock is a little piece of heaven. Now I'm going to remind you that this takes place in the 1950s or earlier, and they did not have cell phones, and they didn't have internet, and they didn't have cable TV, so it's going to be just them. Now you see there's the boat, and they've got a lot of water to travel before they get way out here to the lighthouse. So they're going to be like stranded on an island aboard the rock. Ronnie, swathed in burled oilskins 3 sizes too big for him, sat crouched in the stern of the relief boat that was taking them out to the rock. When he sighted it first on the horizon, shaped like a low-flying ship, he turned to call to his aunt, but Martha Morris had sighted it too. Her face was gayer and younger than Ronnie had ever seen it. She nodded and smiled and called something to him that was lost in the wind, but he knew she was happy and as excited as he. At the little landing on the southwest corner of Tern Rock, they were put ashore hurriedly. The wind was shifting, and the men were eager to put back. The luggage was carried in. Wilbert Denton gave them a few last instructions, turned over the keys to the stores, and stepped aboard the boat. 10 minutes later, it was a mere speck, rising and falling in the green troughs. Now, when he said the keys to the store, that doesn't mean they're shopping. I think it just means keys to the storage where they keep their supplies. Here we have a picture. And we see lots of birds flying around. I hope they like birds, because it's not a very big rock that they're on, is it? I wouldn't exactly call it an island. A middle-aged woman and an 11-year-old boy were alone on Tern Rock. In their hands rested the safety of every ship plying the sea lanes within sight of its flashing light. Ronnie stood close to the base of the tower and looked around him. He knew that Tern Rock was 200 feet long, but it looked as small as a platter in a great expanse of heaving water that seemed above them on all sides, ready to break and wash over them. He leaned back and looked up toward the lantern where the terns and gulls and gommets circled and wheeled, soared and dipped in a rhythmic pattern. Well, the author doesn't say exactly what a tern is, but it's mixed in with the gulls, and I do know what a gull is. So I am guessing that a lot of these birds here are terns, T-E-R-N. The birds' mewing cries, the waves' hollow gulps pulling in and out of the rock crevices, the hiss of spray, these were the sounds of Tern Rock. In storms, they would rise and roar in crescendo. They would hush to muted murmurs in still weather, but they would be the ever-present music. Dizzily, he clutched the tower wall for support as a sudden wave of responsibility seemed to wash over him. He caught his breath sharply and turned to his aunt. His sudden doubt of their ability showed in his startled eyes. But Martha Morse understood. She smiled confidently and gave him an encouraging little shake. "I know, Ronnie," she said. "I always used to feel like that too, whenever I came aboard the Rock. We mortals seem just too piddling to be trusted with this God-made pile of rock and this man-made pile of masonry. But remember this, if you and I weren't here, and this light were left alone, this rock and these ledges would be nothing but a danger and a menace. We're needed. And we can do what's expected of us. Now come, let's go inside. We'll get unpacked and settled. We'll make our bunks up first, then we'll plan supper, and then we'll explore." Everything about the lighthouse was a delight to Ronnie. The main room, which was kitchen and living room combined, seemed the warmest, friendliest room he'd ever seen. Its smooth gray walls reflected every dancing shadow, and its compactness, its neatness was as perfect as that of any ship. The built-in cupboards gave it a spacious air for all its smallness. The chairs were comfortable, or would be for longer legs. The table satin smooth and sturdy. There were books in a wall bookcase and games carved from wood. There was a built-in dresser with cheerful, heavy dishes. It was a room where one could feel and be a man. And the blossoming rose geraniums and heliotrope on a little window stand only made him feel more manly, somehow in contrast to their frailty. On another level were two small bunk rooms with built-in curtained bunks high above the floor. The space beneath filled with generous drawers in which to stow one's gear. Ronnie was proud when Aunt Martha took for granted that he would want to have a whole bunk room to himself. Now, how they describe these bunks is more what we call lofts, where the bed is on top and below is a chest of drawers. After 3 days, life on Tern Rock settled into an even pattern. Every daylight hour was filled with busyness. Every hour of dark with quiet pastimes. Aunt Martha laid out a schedule for them both. She herself turned out the light at daybreak. Then, while it cooled, there was breakfast for her to get, and the morning housework for her to do, and a run outdoors for Ronnie or a bit of fishing. Both of them were needed to clean the lanterns, to polish the great lens, to wind the clockwork that drove its revolving mechanism, to pump the oil up to the lamp chamber, and to do all the other routine tasks. Now, a lot of that, if they had electricity, could be electrical, but they don't have electricity out there either, so they have to do it manually. There was time before their dinner for an hour of study, too, and there were 2 hours of schoolwork in the afternoon, with Aunt Martha playing teacher. Together at dusk, they climbed the iron stairs to light the lamp. And I do have a picture of that. I showed it to you before, but I'll show it to you again. And together they always watched it for a moment at its regular rhythmic flash pierce the growing dark. 1, 1, 2, 1. 1, 1, 2, 1. When they were sure that all was going properly, they climbed down the spiral stairs to the snug common room. Then supper, games, and books, and bed. Martha Morse watched Ronnie with some surprise. She had her memories here to live on, but it was strange, she thought, for such an active boy, one who was the center of his gang at school, to fit so easily into the monotony of their quiet life. But there he was before her eyes, happy and busy, poking his nose into every corner like a healthy puppy. "It would be fun to have a dog, Aunt Marthy," he said one day. "Why do you suppose Mr. Flagg doesn't keep a dog?" "Well, you can't keep a dog out here," she told him. "They say it's been tried and they go mad, but I don't know if that's true." Really mad? Ronnie was aghast. Well, they don't develop rabies, I don't suppose, but they go out of their minds. All the same, unless you take them ashore. Another day, Ronnie came in panting, out of breath. I've hunted and hunted over every inch of this rock, and I can't find one single blade of grass. It seems funny that a little bit doesn't grow here by accident. Well, the rock has had its share of accidents of another kind. There have been weeks, horrible wrecks on this ledge. I've seen 3 myself, and many's the good ship that piled on their rocks in the old days before the light was built. Lighthouses, Ronnie, are like a helping hand reaching out from heaven itself, and the tending of them is good work. Good, his aunt told him. So that's the end of chapters 1 and 2. And we have Ronnie just thinking, why isn't there even a blade of grass? Well, it's all rock. Well, that's all for now. Until next time. Bye-bye.